Loud. Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Diane Alvarado. I use she, her pronouns, and I work part-time with College Essay Guy and the Matchlighter Scholars Program to run this FGLI webinar series, which is a professional development space for counselors that are serving any number of students in their caseload that identify as first generation, low income, or otherwise underrepresented in the college space. Really, really excited to have you all here this evening. This is our first FGLI webinar of 2026. So we're really excited to kick this off. I'm going to go ahead and send a couple of links in the chat as we get started. The first, I just want to point to folks that we have webinars and live events happening all the time at College Essay Guy. So you should feel free to click our webinars and live events page to keep up to date and register for future webinars. We've got our March and springtime webinars coming up pretty quickly. And I will also go ahead and send in our live session survey, which is a really good opportunity for participants to just kind of give us feedback on this webinar, on what they would want to see in the future, and just sharing a little bit more about who you are and what you're hoping to get out of College Essay Guide content. So I would really appreciate folks filling that out as well. A couple of housekeeping items before I hand it over to our wonderful presenter. This meeting, as you can see at the top right, is being recorded, and you will get the recording alongside any follow-up materials and resources that Dr. Cha shares after this session. So no need to kind of take any frantic notes or anything like that. Just kind of sit back, relax, and definitely ask any questions. We encourage kind of more formal questions in the Q&A box that's at the bottom of your screen. But I know Dr. Cha has a couple of questions throughout her presentation, so feel free to use the chat to answer those questions as well. And you can also change it so that everyone can see your responses versus just the host and panelists. And so with that being said, I'm excited to introduce this evening's session. Also, sorry, I sound very stuffy because for the third February in a row, am sick during this webinar. So, which is the case in the East Coast. It's been very, very cold. Tonight's session is on supporting undocumented students in 2026. And we do this session every year very, very intentionally because, as I am sure is very well understood by you all, the political, socio-political, socioeconomic landscape is constantly changing. And the students that are most affected are the students, within the demographic that you all serve, and particularly undocumented students. And so we're really excited to have Dr. Maritza Cha with us tonight, who is the founder of School Counselor LLC. She's a school counselor herself and also a counselor educator. So really, really well versed in just supporting counselors to be able to support students and having kind of everybody understand what's in their control versus what's not, because that knowledge is power, particularly in really tumultuous and constantly changing times. And so without further ado, I know that Dr. Cha has some amazing slides to get through, so I will hand it over to her to get us started. Thanks for being here, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I appreciate it. We do have a lot of content to get through because, as always, I over prepare because I'm that high achiever in me. So, as mentioned, we'll skip this slide. And while I'm chatting a little bit, if you don't mind putting in the chat, just your name, your current profession, the state you're located in, and just how are you feeling today? Sometimes the world is a little heavy, and so our numbers might change. So, in this dog scale, how are you feeling today? So, if you can just kind of put that in the chat. And while you're doing that, I do want to mention if there is something that I didn't include in the slide deck, please feel free to email me. I have a lot of resources and I really had to curate the top ones to include in this PowerPoint. So if there's something that I didn't touch upon that is an issue at your school site or your district or you need support in, please contact me. More than happy to send any other resources that you might need and weren't touched upon here. It's just I had to really narrow it down for the 55 minutes that we're together. So thank you so much for putting some answers in the chat. All right, so we see some folks from my home state of California. Hopefully you all survived the rain. Some folks from Pennsylvania, Florida. Great. I see a lot of threes. Oh, sleepy. Yeah, it's midweek. I get that. And then some nines as well, and some eights. Ooh, that is a good face. Thank you so much for participating, and keep doing that as we're working together on this. So as mentioned before, I was a teacher before I became a counselor. I believe my whole career I've been a social justice educator. I was a high school teacher, actually at my high school for 3 years, and then I worked for the second largest district, LAUSD. And at a certain point, they gave us an opportunity to create a pilot school, and so I did that for 4 years. I was a teacher and a college advisor for that school. I then got my second master's, and I became a school counselor at a smaller district than LAUSD. My passion is college counseling and undocumented students. Um, I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California, and that will come into play a little later. As most of you know, Los Angeles was the center point in June of last year of a lot of the immigration enforcement ramp up. So unfortunately, my former students, my colleagues have been stopped by ICE, have had interactions with them, not pleasant, if I'm being honest. A lot of my friends and family were discussing just things that we never thought in the world that we would need to discuss. You might also know me because I see some friendly names on the chat. From my different leadership positions, I work a lot with ASCA, the American School Counseling Association, and I'm one of the California Association School Counselor Board of Directors as well. And lastly, I want to share with you why this topic is important to me. I grew up in a mixed status family, meaning I was a citizen, and at a certain point in our lives, my parents were either not or they were green card holders or in the process. Um, I have also helped students and currently am helping students that are undocumented through the process and witnessing firsthand sometimes how higher ed education institutions are not always friendly to these students. I won't mention the university's name, but I was on a call just hearing my student try to advocate for themselves in terms of financial aid, and this university told them, you'll get whatever's left over, if anything. I was like, well, that was kind of rude, but those are the kind of the interactions that our students are having. And so as was mentioned before, one of my passions is really to help counselors and how to better support this specific population. So we have four really large objectives. So we're going to go through them quickly. So if you have follow-up questions, let me know. So one, we're going to go through the foundations of how to have conversations. I am going to lay the groundwork because I think people see like social media content and they think they know what's happening, but they really don't. It is a lot. Immigration enforcement is very complex. It is layered. And what these students are going through, it's not just about deciding college. There's a lot of things they're thinking about in the decision making. Kind of key considerations to keep in mind in 2026. And then some resources on college affordability, scholarships, some financial aid realities, and then also how to take care of yourself. Um, I know we have to take care of our students and our families, but we are also, some of us are dealing with some of these issues ourselves and our families because we might be of mixed status families, or if you live in certain states, you might also be an undocumented educator. So that's a heavy load to carry. So some suggestions on that as well. Just a friendly reminder when we talk about this topic, please use this information to provide benefit to others and grow professionally. It is intended to educate and it is not legal advice. And as it was mentioned before, this is an ever-changing landscape. So this information is accurate as of technically today, but just to be safe, I put 2 days ago. If you use resources, just please make sure to give them credit. So let's start with some definitions. So an undocumented student is a foreign national who entered the US without inspection or with fraudulent documents. Basically, they crossed the border. A second way to become an undocumented student, they entered legally as a non-immigrant, but then violated the terms of his or her or their status and remained in the US without authorization. That is the number one way that we have undocumented students. They came on a visa and they overstayed their visa. That's basically what happened. That's number two. Number three has DACA, Deferred Action Childhood Arrival, or has previously had DACA and then fell out of that status. A lot of our K through 12 students wouldn't fall under that anymore. Those students, the DACA students, are in higher ed at this point in time. Number four are otherwise currently in the process of legalizing, meaning they have TPS or they have asylum cases. So any of those, if they fall under that, they would be considered an undocumented student. Other terms that you might have used or heard are Generation 1.5, Dreamers, Aspiring Citizens. I do want to just mention, please don't ever mention the word illegal. It is a dehumanizing and very hurtful term, so we try to avoid using that term. Some of the research has shown that many undocumented students have lived in the US most of their lives. They learned English. They've either attended elementary, middle, high school, or a combination of those, have completed high school and want to pursue a college education, and just currently lack a way to become legal residents or citizens in the US. And they come with a lot of strengths. One of them is that they're resourceful, they have to have advocacy skills, communication skills, grit, and sometimes leadership, depending on their family dynamics. But I want to be mindful because sometimes the media focuses on a certain race or ethnicity when we talk about undocumented students. I live in Los Angeles. Unfortunately, yes, there are Latinos getting caught up in this, but there are also a lot of Asian folks that are getting caught up in this, a lot of folks from different places, different countries that do are not Latino that are also getting up in the ICE enforcement. So we want to be mindful of the intersectionalities that these students carry with them. While undocumented is one of their identities, it is not the sole identity. So we have folks that might come from different socioeconomic backgrounds. They might be first in their family to attend college. They might be part of LGBTQI community. I've had a student that was undocumented and part of LGBTQAI and felt like his family didn't understand what he was going through in any way, shape, or form. They may have a disability. They might have a language access barrier or might be in this country without biological parents. So there are just other intersectionalities that we need to keep in mind when we're counseling these students. Here are more definitions. I'm not going to go through all of them. I will focus on one though, the mixed status families, because that will come up when we talk about financial aid. And as I mentioned before, it's when members have different citizenship status or immigration statuses within one family. So there have been times where I have counseled students and one student is a citizen, another student is documented, and another student is undocumented. And so the family has three different pathways for each student. Students who are undocumented, again, to kind of push back on the narrative. In 2010, Asian folks outnumbered Hispanic folks and that were immigrating to the US. So again, the media likes to portray a certain type of undocumented immigrant, but that's not necessarily the truth. And as mentioned before, most of the DACA eligible students are in higher ed at this point. Even if you think you haven't had an undocumented student, most likely you have. Anywhere from 98,000 to 120,000 undocumented high school students graduate from high schools every single year. So some of the challenges that this population is facing is anxiety around asking questions that pertain to their situation in large group settings. Unfortunately, we have had educators that are making comments about what's happening in a large setting, and it makes the students uncomfortable. They're feeling isolated, like nobody understands what they're going through, helpless, especially regarding post-secondary options as the landscape is changing. Stigma around not mastering English quickly or having an accent. I also want to focus on the triple trauma that some students are experiencing. It is traumatic to come to this country sometimes in the way that they are coming, whether it be through the border or in any other way. And then once here, some students don't feel like they fit in, or they're getting accustomed to a culture that they're not aware of and the rules that they're not aware of. And then even if they go home, there's been a separation, right? Family might have stayed here and they sent the student back to their home country. So there's just a lot of trauma happening around the experience of coming to a different country. Students and or families refusing mental health support due to cultural stigma. Again, I will speak for myself in the Latino culture. I work with students that are Latino background and Asian background. And so I understand that there's a lot of stigma about getting mental health support. Reuniting with parents after years of separation, substance abuse, and unfortunately, again, in some inner cities, we're seeing the upticking of gang affiliation because when a country is telling you in different messaging that you don't belong, you're going to look for a place to belong. And that's where gangs come in because that is a place where they feel like they're accepted. Systemic challenges. Again, many undocumented children face challenges at school, at home, especially bullying. We have had a lot of incidents where students have reported bullying incidents, especially the rhetoric that they're hearing from the adults in their lives or in the media, using that against their peers. So, like TPS, calling one child one child calling another child, oh, you only have TPS, or they're going to revoke your visa, using that as a taunting method. Less parent participation in school by caregivers, lack of family access to social services, and fear of reporting crimes to law enforcement. There have been incidents where if there's been a domestic violence incident, the police have come, and then there was one incident I'm specifically thinking of where the mom was reported twice and then sent away, deported. So again, there's just a lot of things and trauma happening. And then once in the detention center, we are getting to hear from nonprofits that work closely with immigrants that the conditions in the detention centers are inhumane is one word that they're using, and just not appropriate for the amount of people that are there. I do want to ask in the chat, are there any other challenges that you see that this population faces? Applying for FAFSA, thank you. All right. Working adults under DACA, yeah. Travel in general, yeah. When is it safe to travel? Lack of a state institution in Florida and Texas, yep. Certain career pathways needing state certification, yep. hmm Not wanting to complete scholarship, that's a huge one. Lack of funding for financial aid, yep, absolutely. All right, you could go ahead and keep putting some in the chat. I will move on. So that's kind of what's always been happening with this population. But then when this current administration came in, um, on January 20th, there was a lot of executive orders signed, which have impacted our students. And again, we're thinking intersectionalities, right? So not just their citizenship status, but maybe other identities as well. So one of a couple that I want to highlight of the executive orders is the ending of birthright citizenship. That has a lot of families that have undocumented or mixed status folks very fearful of what might happen. In case you don't know, that specific executive order and the lawsuit that happened will be heard by the Supreme Court this year. And I think that will change some of the answers to the questions that I'm seeing in the Q&A, because that's going to change the landscape of what they decide. Sending military to the border by declaring a national emergency, restricting federal funds from sanctuary cities, and potentially taking legal action against them. Keep that in mind when we talk about financial aid. Require immigrants unlawful in the U.S. to register and be fingerprinted. That has always been on the books as a requirement, but it wasn't thoroughly enforced, and now it's being enforced. Deny public benefits to unauthorized immigrants, and then ICE being allowed before this current administration, even during Trump 1.0, ICE stayed away from schools, hospitals, and churches. But now that has changed as of January 20th, and they can go onto school campuses. There's been some districts that have put out or have thought of put out statements in support of ICE. And then we'll talk about the 100-mile border zone in a little bit. I do want to highlight here, this isn't read in executive orders because there's been over 250 executive orders signed, and it's hard to keep track of all of them and which ones apply to education and which ones don't. The Educational Council has done a good job of writing basically what is the executive order, the synopsis of it, and then the analysis of it, and if there are any lawsuits, kind of where the lawsuits are at. So, Diana, if you're around, if you don't mind going into the PowerPoint and putting this link in the chat, that'd be fantastic. So yeah, you can have it here. It's up to 68 pages now, but it does have a glossary where you can quickly kind of point at which one you would want to take a look at for the executive orders and kind of where it's at. Thank you, Diana. Carecen, so we mentioned the 100-mile border zone. So in case you don't know, the rules are a little different if you're within the 100-mile border zone. Some cities might sound similar to you. I'll mention them: Chicago, Los Angeles, San Diego, Houston, Miami, Tampa, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, New York, Boston. These are maybe the cities that you've heard in the news that ICE has been ramping up their enforcement. That is not a coincidence. It is because they're within the 100-mile border zone. So usually, if you're not within the 100-mile border zone, Border Patrol officers cannot detain you without reasonable suspicion or search your belongings without probable cause. That is not necessarily true in the 100-mile border zone. At an immigration checkpoint, officers do not need suspicion to ask questions about immigration status. Questions should be brief. Officers need reasonable suspicion to continue holding a person at a checkpoint. It is recommended that you don't try to flee the checkpoint as it is a felony, and you do have the right to remain silent, but that will trigger a second inspection. They also have roving patrols within the 100 miles of border zone, means you get pulled over, just like if you had committed a traffic violation. Officers must have a suspicion that drivers or passengers committed an immigration violation or federal crime. But as we've seen in a lot of videos, that is very loose standards. Any questions asked should relate to the officer's suspicion. Arrest or prolonged stop require probable cause, and drivers and passengers have the right to remain silent and not answer questions, but they will most likely arrest you and take you somewhere if you choose to exercise that right. I can tell you that the roving patrols are happening. One of my colleagues, former colleagues, got stopped, and it was a roving patrol. He got pulled over. They basically screamed at him like, "What's your citizenship status? Are you American?" I will tell you, he had his passport with him and his birth certificate, and they still wanted to detain him and take him to a detention center, even though he had those two things with him. So just keep in mind that sometimes, that might not be enough. And then obviously ACLU has put out some things to consider whether carrying your passport is a good idea or not. All right, some legislation around this population. As of today, the law of the land is still Plyler versus Doe, and that is a Supreme Court ruling from 1982. And basically, it says that all children, regardless of immigration status, are to be educated for free by the U.S. public school system. It did recognize um, in their decision, the Supreme Court justices did recognize that children were brought here by parent choice. Their educational rights are protected by the 14th Amendment. And in general, it is just best in our economy to have people that are educated and literate. I will say, along with the Birthright Citizenship Executive Order Supreme Court case, Plyler versus Doe might be overturned. There is a court case that possibly can do that. It depends on the justices and their rationale. They will be hearing that case later on, and I'm sure we'll get a decision sometime in June, early July, which is usually when they let the decisions go for the Supreme Court case. I guess I should tell you, as an undergrad, I was a poli-sci history major, so all this legal stuff is like, I'm a nerd for it. So just I thought I would share that. The other law that we need to keep in mind is FERPA, Family Educational and Privacy Act. So this is a federal law that protects student records at educational institutions from TK through 12 and higher ed. So even if you were to know that a student is undocumented, if someone were to ask you, you have to protect that student by FERPA. So you are not allowed to say anything if someone were to ask you anyway. DACA, we kind of went over. And then even now, every single Congress, they have a Federal Dream Act that has been put as a bill for them to hear. And it just sits there and kind of nothing happens to it. The only time that it actually did almost make it into law, a Federal Dream Act, was in 2001. But the day that they were going to sign it was September 11th. And so we all know what happened September 11th, and that's why it wasn't signed, and that was as close as we got to a Federal Dream Act. All right, some things to consider in 2026. So students and families are thinking of the following considerations. They're unsure of who can be trusted. I'm sure we have a lot of lovely counselors in this Zoom room, but you need to keep in mind that for some of the families, you are authority figures. and they are like, you are not to be trusted. So it's really important for you to build trust with your families, and we'll go over some ways to do that. The changing federal policies and court cases around immigration status gives families a headache because they can't keep up with everything that is happening. Number one thing that they're considering is location of colleges. A lot of students want to stay closer to home or family just in case things happen. Families have mom, dad, and then they have siblings. So if a student is somewhere in the East Coast and they live in California and their parents get deported, well, who's going to take care of the siblings? Where are they going to end up? So those are real considerations that families are having. So as much as the student might want to go to the East Coast, they might be rethinking that decision and staying in their home state because it's closer in case anything happens. Academic challenges and standardized testing, all this fear that is happening, all this trauma, research has shown time and time again that it impacts the academic abilities of students. Their mental health is also impacted. And we've seen a lot of increase of undocumented students wanting to take a gap year or work before going to college, or maybe going to community college first, because again, it's closer to home, all right? It doesn't cost a lot of money. We need to save money. Unfortunately, there are some families that have not left their house since the ice has ramped up, and neighbors are dropping off market to them, and that's just kind of how it is, because a lot of these families are on survival mode, and as educators we need to start understanding that a lot of these families are just trying to survive and are also choosing to self-deport because survival can't last that long, right? You can't be on that, your body can't handle that kind of stress for a long, prolonged time. So some families are choosing to just self-deport and go back to their home countries. And then financial aid has always been an issue, but even more so now. Students are asking if higher ed campuses are safe and what protections are in place if ICE is around and they are undocumented themselves. So it is important for us to advocate for our students. So when we go to college fairs, we need to start asking our higher ed counterparts some very important questions. So in the chat, some of you have mentioned it, but how does your school currently identify and support undocumented students or students from mixed status families, and what gaps do you see in services, communication, or trust building? And you could say like our district isn't doing anything. That's real. So you can also say that as well. Okay, we have ideas clubs, great. Inclusive language, community circles, that's great, Rebecca. Family services, food, clothing, absolutely. Great. Keep them coming in. So ASCA, our state National Association, what does it say? They have a position statement on how to support undocumented students. It breaks my heart when I see someone on Facebook on a school counseling group ask for support on how to support their undocumented students, and we have counselors saying you're to stay neutral. Okay, let's see what ASCA says. So the role of school counselors includes advocating for the rights of all students, including undocumented students, supporting undocumented students by helping them gain access to equitable education, working with school and district personnel to promote awareness and educate counselors and personnel on their rights and procedures, support the family with information about educational access and rights, working with community partners to leverage resources to provide support in keeping families intact, ensuring schools are safe haven for undocumented students, providing counseling intervention and social emotional support for students impacted by immigration stressors, making sure that you're aware of the most current and up-to-date policies, and advocating against the practice of separating children from their families at U.S. borders. So I see a lot of advocating in this position statement, and that is what our job is, right? If we're truly going to support all students, that means all students. So some ways to do this. Build trust and ensure confidentiality is number one. I can give you as many resources as I have, but if you don't have trust built with your families, those resources are going to stay in your office because you need to know who do those resources need to go to, right? So when students feel culturally understood and safe, they are more willing to engage in the counseling process. you making sure that you reaffirm the student's life experience. Um, it is okay to tell them, yeah, this sucks. Like, I understand that what you're feeling is valid. Undocumented students face unique fears and stressors that significantly impact their academic and personal development. And again, once we're able to establish that trust, we can navigate those post-secondary conversations more openly. So making sure that we are using trauma-informed and student-centered strategies. So integrating simple emotional check-ins into advising, like, how are you feeling about your options right now? And that also lets you know what do they think their options are, right? Because that's where you teach them. Oh, have you thought about this option? What feels exciting or stressful about planning ahead? And normalizing the emotions that they're feeling, this uncertainty, right? No matter where you are in the US, you basically went from semi-stable, right? Stable environment to now everything is changing constantly all the time. And that uncertainty definitely creates some stressors or trauma, depending on the student. Use strengths-based language, so emphasize resiliency, creativity, and leadership. I always tell my students, you can't control what is happening necessarily out in the world, but you can control making sure that you're in the best position possible when things change. So make sure that you're doing what you need to do, and that includes like getting good grades, making sure that you have the grades to apply to college, because when things change, because inevitably they will change. That is the one constant in our world. Things will change. I'm not saying, not trying to diminish that there not might be a lot of lives lost in the process or a lot of changes that don't happen. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is eventually, with time, things will change. History is like a pendulum. It swings back and forth. And right now we're here, and eventually it will switch back. So when that happens, you need to be in the best position possible to ready to go, right? When policies change, if DACA gets reopened again outside of renewals, then students can apply and do that. Build trust through transparency, confidentiality, and cultural humility as well. So my kind of, this is something I created, is tell the facts gently, but be honest and try to create that safety, and that will equal that trust that you need. Reassure families and students without making false promises. The number one example I can give you is financial aid, right? We have a lot of families that they're like, well, Miss Cha, why don't you just tell me what would you do? No, 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 no. That's where we have to kind of have a little backbone and say, no, these are your options. These are the pros and cons of each option. But as a family, you need to go talk about it and make the decision. Because at the end of the day, who's going to suffer the consequences of whatever decision is made is the family, not us, right? So we need to push it back. And I will tell you, with this population, a lot of responses will start with, I am not a legal expert. You might need to see a lawyer. And that is a difficulty with this population. I wish I could give you a magic, this is a one thing that works for everyone. That's not how undocumented students work. Undocumented students, every single case is individual. There are nuances to this. So a lot of them will have to seek legal support because of all the changes. Use art, play, and movement to process. I know at one of my school sites, we had a in-person calming room that sometimes we would use. So making sure you have what you need in your office. Sometimes going for a walk with students helps. And then making sure to include families in the college decision process. Sometimes we have folks and students very energetic and wanting to do Questbridge and wanting to do Posse and other things. And a lot of these colleges are not local to their home state. Are their parents okay with that? Because if they go through this entire process and then their parents are like, no, where do you think you're going? That's going to be very harmful and hurtful to the student, right? So it's important to get the parents involved, especially if their student wants to go far away, and just ensure that the parents are aware. And also, one thing I used to do is have a first gen panel. And I always included a parent in that panel because from parent to parent is very different than a counselor telling parent, right? And one of the first gen panels that I had, a parent already has been through it, right? They have an alumni of someone that graduated from college, and they could relate to the fears that the parents were having. Like, I'm going to let my baby go far away. How is that going to be okay? And then the parent could tell them their experience and be like, we had the same worry. We understood. but this is what we did. And look, now we're happier that she went through this college and now she's out and graduated. She has a good job. So sometimes that helps as well. There is a resource from the Children's Network and LA Parent of kind of things what not to say. So don't say to this population, don't worry about it. That's not necessarily true. That won't happen to you. That creates a false security, and just making sure that we don't create more anxiety. So what we should say is, you aren't alone. I am an ally if you are an ally, and it's okay to feel scared. There are also breakdowns of like based on your age, kind of sentence starters that you can have with the family or the student to kind of have this conversation around ICE. So what can educators do? I think some of you mentioned it. Um, use inclusive, non-intrusive language, display multilingual safe space posters, and create those spaces. Advocate for equity in policies and practices. Provide culturally responsive counseling. Embed mindfulness and peer support. And then again, collaborate with families. So making sure that you normalize mental health conversations. The other thing that at my school we did is we as school counselors present to 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders, and then we have parent night, right? A section of your newsletter or a section of your presentation should just be information about undocumented students. That way no one has to self-disclose if they don't want to. That information is just available there in case they need to have it. And you don't have to use the word undocumented. You could use aspiring citizens. I know in California we have AB 540. So there's different words that you can use to kind of hide, what you're really trying to talk about. And then again, know your students and families in order to be able to identify who should be on your campus. This is especially important as we head into graduation and celebrations in June. I can tell you by law, ICE can lie to get access to a person. And so in LA, what we saw in June of last year as celebrations were happening is we had ICE officers come onto the campus and say, hey, the parents of Joe Schmo told me to come and get the child. So I need you to release him to me. And luckily, the front office ladies were like, that doesn't sound like that kid's parents, right? And they're like, you're not in the emergency contact either, so we can't release this child to you. So again, making sure the emergency contacts as best as you can are up to date, and not making sure that your protocols are being followed, and knowing who the family is. Other things that educators can do is connect with community resources and partner with local legal and mental health orgs. Having know your rights. That presentation is also constantly changing as things are evolving, but also just having PDs on immigration trauma and implicit bias and just folks' rights as well. And again, even if you give them the resource, if your district and your state is open to it, then holding those workshops either virtually using district Zoom or holding it on your campus. That doesn't mean you're putting it on, you're just giving them the space. But again, I understand that not every state is allowing that. So again, at whatever capability you might have. Educate staff and peers, especially with trauma and culturally responsive care. And again, stay informed. This is hyperlinked here as well. It is steps campuses can take to support detained or deported students. In LA, I can say we have had a lot of students that have been detained and deported. We had one student from LAUSD where their teachers got together and created a press conference and created pressure for the student to be released. And it took months, but he was eventually released. You might have heard this story because it did go viral. It was a student with autism that was walking his dog, and they weren't looking for him. They were looking for someone else, but they just kind of took him from him walking the dog and took him to a detention center. Again, if your state allows for you to ask these questions, making sure that your district has an ICE response plan. And the one thing ICE can't do is unless they have a judicial warrant, if they just have an administrative warrant, which is what they have right now, they really haven't gotten a lot of judicial warrants. They cannot access private area signs. So making a classroom a private area sign, literally it could be something you print out that says private area and put it on the door. They legally cannot go in there. And for the most part, the nonprofits have been hearing that ICE has been respecting that. So restaurants that they've gone into and it says private area, they don't go in the back of the kitchen. There's a laundromat here in Los Angeles that became the entire laundromat became a private area, and you need a membership to get in. So people have done this, and it has kept ICE away to some degree. Inform families or resources to create emergency safety plans. There's a lot of districts now that put on their website a caregiver affidavit, because again, in case the parents are taken, the parent can sign that and then just give it to someone they trust to turn into the school. If I'm being completely honest, though, some families are even having discussions about giving up their rights to their children for the time being in case they are deported. Offering healing circles or small group counseling, civic engagement. We have seen, especially in the LA area and California, a lot of students, both undocumented, mixed status, and everyone else, protesting what is happening in their communities. So empowering students to do civic engagement, and again, it depends on your district. Some districts have allowed educators to not protest with them, but walk on the side of them just to make sure everyone stays safe. Some other districts have negotiated with the leaders of the student protest and said, hey, if we give you this space, would you stay inside school grounds instead of leaving outside? So it just depends on your school district and how comfortable they are. Address bullying and discrimination, and then classroom lessons on diversity as well. And then again, it's super important to protect student privacy. So not asking about immigration status unless your state requires it. Creating the protect student privacy. I hyperlinked a doc there that gives you ideas on how to do that. And again, making sure that you partner, and some state laws may limit your ability on how do you support undocumented students, but you can build trusting relationships by being authentic and again, not over promising support. You can be honest with the student and say, hey, our state has this law, and unfortunately, there are some things that I am limited in telling you. That's the truth. As long as you're honest with them, they'll be more appreciative than if you don't tell them the truth. And again, giving hope and holding space without judgment. I think that is the biggest portion and takeaway that our students can have, is making sure that you give them some kind of hope. All right, now we got to the resources part. All right, first resource, Erica's Lighthouse. We have a lot of tier 1 and tier 2, tier 2 and tier 3 interventions, but not a lot of tier 1. That's what I meant to say. So this is a free resource. All of the resources I give are either free, because, we work in education. And so this is a free tier 1 mental health support. It has 4 different pillars. One is classroom lessons. And again, the classroom lesson is already broken down for you. There's a PowerPoint already ready to go. All you have to do is put your school site logo or your district logo, and all you have to do is download. There's also training for staff on some good mental health practices for students. There's 2 options. You can either play the video that's already there for the training, or you can train your staff yourself if you want to, and the PowerPoint is ready to go. And then the last pillar that I really want to touch upon is the family workbooks. There's 3 of them. It informs families on how to talk to their students about mental health. I unfortunately use a lot of workbook number 3, which is if the student is hospitalized, what questions they should ask around medication and just insurance and stuff like that. And so the last pillar I will say, because I saw that earlier in the chat, is around student clubs. And if you do start a student club on mental health at your campus, there is about $200, I believe, of seed money that they give you as well. But this is, if you scan the QR code, you just have to do a free account and you get access to all of this, and everything has pre and post tests. So you can show the data to your faculty, to your principal if you like. All right, college and career. I will say I'm highlighting some of these, but in a couple of slides, you'll have a long list of resources that I put for you. I'm just highlighting some of them. So what we've been seeing a lot in our students is saying, like, I don't see the point of going to college since I'm undocumented and can't work anyway. So what do you tell a student in that case, right? So you can remind students of the benefits of higher education, connecting them to networks and community. So alumni, we've had an undocumented student alumni panel where alumni have come back from that have different pathways. One went to community college, one went to a four-year college, and then another one went to work and then went to college, and then another one that just went to work. So giving them options of different pathways that they can take depending on their situation. Opening doors to new professional opportunities and income sources, not necessarily in the US. I have a lot of friends who are undocumented, had their education in the US, and then left and now live in Spain, Canada, um, yeah, different places. I can't think of all of the places that they live in. And basically they work there or work remotely for US companies. Gain new skills, resources to pursue independent contracting and entrepreneurship, which do not require work authorization. Move and work abroad, get prepared to pursue future opportunities, and inform students about virtual learning opportunities if they're uncomfortable with in-person attendance as well. A lot of students are looking at out of US colleges as well. There's been an increase in that. It is important to have a warm handoff. So I know the University of California has this website here. And literally in one of the tabs, every UC has a person that you can provide the contact information, email, and I think phone number of an ally on the UC campus. So for example, if my student was going to UC Santa Barbara, I would give them Cuca Acosta's number. And I think if you've been to a UC conference, we all know Cuca. She's very dynamic. So the Cal States and the UCs have this directory of an ally that is on their campus, and you can provide that information to your student. College options. So there's 22 states currently in the DC that provide in-state tuition to this undocumented students. 18 and DC have comprehensive access and also provide access to the state financial aid. Florida, Oklahoma, and Texas recently eliminated access to in-state tuition. So when I started this presentation in January, it was 25, but now it's down to 22. And here in the map, you will see kind of where your state lands. So if you are in Texas, the financial aid is limited to DACA. If you are in a blue state, like Louisiana, there's no state policy. And then some of the red states have restrictive or prohibitive enrollment. And I always like looking at this map. It is updated constantly, just because policies are constantly changing. And even though I'm in California, my students might have family members in Texas and they want to go to college there. So it's always good to look at this map. Another thing to consider is that even though you might be green on the map, meaning that you have in-state tuition at this time, again, you have to remind your students at this time, as of today, this is the law. So for example, in California, we do have AB 540. They can still apply to the CADA, the California Dream Act application. That is currently the law. But as high school counselors and as counselors, I think we need to be aware that there have been lawsuits against in-state tuition in 5 different states so far, and we expect that number to grow. So for California, for example, on November 20th, 2025, the U.S. Department of Justice filed a lawsuit, and it is working its way up to have a decision be made. The first decision was basically to dismiss the lawsuit to a certain degree, but they can appeal that dismissal, and so that's what's happening right now. So keep that in mind that even though currently your state might have in-state tuition, that is being maybe debated in the courts. So that's why it's important for us to keep up to date with information. Career options. So currently there is no federal law that prohibits undocumented individuals from pursuing entrepreneurship. Whether your student is going to college or not going to college, I know the question is always like, how do they pay for things? Entrepreneurship is the way to go. So they can't be hired by a company, but they can hire themselves. And that is the loophole. And so entrepreneurial career pathways do not require work authorization and include options such as starting a business, independent contracting, freelancing, or joining a worker cooperative, which is basically a bunch of businesses or LLCs that work as one. I knew of someone that had an LLC, and anything he could think of, he would put under that LLC. He would dog sit, babysit, he would paint, he would sell you music beats. So anything he could, I think he had like 20 jobs last time he counted. So all of that would go under his LLC, and that's how he would pay for tuition at UCLA. Organizations such as the Dream.us and Immigrants Rising provide endless resources for individuals on how to navigate permits, taxes, and internship around entrepreneurship. And I hyperlink two things here for you. 5 tips for educators to help students get started as independent contractors, and then a lesson on entrepreneurship as well. All right, mixed status families. So, which undocumented contributors are at most risk is what we're going to talk about now. By law, there are specific processes that the Department of Homeland Security has to follow in order to access the Department of Ed records by law, right? And I was able to talk to someone from the Department of Education, and that's what they said. By law, that's what happens. But he also added, but the reality might be a different thing. And so, however, we don't know if Department of Homeland Security is using FAFSA data as an immigration and enforcement tool. So there is no guarantee that that data will not be shared in the future, right? We don't know that it's been shared at this point, but we also don't know that that policy might not change in the future. Families need to consider if the information they will provide would be new or updated, especially their address when they're submitting FAFSA. And they have to make that risk-informed decision. So if they have an older sibling that has gone through FAFSA, then the government already has that address on file for them, right? And the family needs to consider that that's already out there. But if they changed addresses, do they want to take the risk and provide the new address to the federal government? And that's a decision each family has to make independently. We're not here to judge. We're not here to say which one's wrong or right. But this, again, the families are going to suffer the consequences, so they have to make the decision. Contributors likely to be most at risk for being flagged or wanting to get that information by DHS is if the undocumented contributor has not recently interacted with federal agents, such as like the new FAFSA would be the first time they are providing their current address, or undocumented contributors with interactions with DHS, such as individuals that have had a final deportation orders, have recent fallen out of status, so like they were documented and are no longer documented, or they were an asylum case and no longer are, have a complicated criminal history. So those are kind of the folks that are most at risk, but that doesn't mean you don't carry no risk. It's just your risk is a little higher. Steps to consider when completing the FAFSA for mixed status families. Step 1, identify what information, if any, has been submitted to the federal government already. And again, think about like older siblings or if they themselves have gone to school. Step 2, if you have not previously disclosed your current address, applying to FAFSA may be risky. There's always some risk involved. And if step 3, if you have previously disclosed your current address, your risk in applying to FAFSA may be lower, but it's not zero. We do not know the risk definitely. At this moment, we can only speculate based on the government's enforcement patterns in recent months. But again, we don't know what they might do next. All right, these are some scholarship lists that you can have. The two I recommend and that I use the most is Immigrants Rising. They have a scholarship list and a fellowship list that they update very recently. So I use that. And then MALDIF as well. So MALDIF is the Mexican American League Defense Education Fund, if I remember correctly, and they have a scholarship list and it's by months. So if you have a scholarship bulletin, you can literally cut and paste by month and just add it to your scholarship bulletin as well. All right, sustaining yourself. I'm not going to read this to you, but I know when I get a little hopeless in the midst of all this, I like to reread this to myself just as validation, because it is normal to feel hopeless. It is normal to feel grief and rage. That is what our students are feeling. They're feeling grief. If that is the basic emotion that they're feeling. And I will say one little part of this poem. So if you're feeling like nothing is helping, if you can't focus or can't stop crying or can't stop scrolling, it's not because you're doing something wrong. It's because your body knows something is very, very wrong. So allow us to hold space for not only ourselves, but our students and our families that are going through so much. So be kind to yourself. So some ways to do that is prioritize your mental and physical well-being, use mindfulness, or I think work-life balance is even more important now. Someone was asking me earlier today, like, how do you embed yourself in all of this and then kind of not drive yourself mad? And I'm like, because the weekends are mine. The weekends, I don't doom scroll. I don't do anything. I am with my family and I'm fully present. And that's the gift I'm giving myself. I don't take any meetings during the weekends. You cannot find me. I'm probably at Disneyland somewhere. Emotional regulation and reflection, so journaling, therapy, just being creative, and setting boundaries to prevent burnout, and then also knowing who your safe space and supportive spaces are. I know I'm presenting, but I'm by nature an introvert, and I have a very small circle of friends that I trust, and that's who I vent to, because you need those supportive friends and supportive spaces. I also wanted to kind of highlight this. Micro rest is how we survive macro exhaustion. And so it gives you some ideas of, again, how to do that rest. Maybe not for a long period of time. We can't all go on vacations as much as we would want, but you can close your eyes for 3 breaths before getting out of the car. You can breathe for 15 seconds before you open your laptop. You can say no. I know we have a hard time saying no, but you can say no to something and feeling your shoulders drop. So just some ideas. And then other things that people have done, because I know for me, again, when I feel hopeless, yes, there's rest, but I also want to do something. I want to be part of the solution. So you can protest, you can vote, you can donate your time by providing groceries. I know some teachers and educators have, if there's a corner where a lot of their students are going to be at, they're at that corner, making sure that they walk safely to school, right? Or call your legislators, write an op-ed, check in with your friends that are might be impacted and educate others as well. Literally, this happened today, and this is hyperlinked here. The National Academy of Education sent a letter to DHS and ICE addressing educational implications on immigration enforcement actions. I know some admin like research with whatever you tell them, so it has a lot of research articles attached to it. So I just thought I would put that here, and obviously the red cards as well. All right, we're not going to go through the videos, but I did hyperlink some ACLU videos on what student rights are and how to protect yourself. And then this is the last part before I quiet. So some resources. So at the school sites that I've been at, we've spoken many languages, up to 5. So I don't speak 5 languages, so I use AI to help me out. So Hey Jen is AI powered and it creates avatars. You just have to type in the script, tell it what language you want it to translate, and it creates a video with an avatar that speaks for you. So as I mentioned before, I'm an introvert, so I do use this sometimes to communicate with families without having to use my real face. We are seeing an uptick of students that are from indigenous lands. So here are 2 resources of indigenous translations. So if you need someone to translate for you and it's an indigenous language, here are some resources for that. They currently only have 2 states, Guatemala, or 2 countries, sorry, Guatemala and Mexico. So those are hyperlinked here. And then here are more resources on mental health, the immigration preparedness tool. There's a book here. There's some college and career. And I think I saw Justin in the webinar, so I want to give him a shout out. Justin Zhang with ChatGPT also created a list of colleges that meet full need for undocumented students. And then there's also a chapter on this lovely book regarding undocumented students, and then legal support as well, self-care, my own resources, because like I said, I had to kind of cut down. So you can find more resources here. And thank you so much. We're almost at time.
No, that was perfect. Thank you so, so much, Dr. Cha. I'm going to add a spotlight really quick. For those of you that have a hard stop right at the top of the hour, thank you so much for joining us. I think, Dr. Cha, if it's all right with you, maybe like 5 or so minutes just to kind of touch on some of the questions that came in through Q&A.
Sure.
But yes, I echo everybody in the chat, and I'm sure I would speak for all of our attendees tonight when I say that all of this information was so valuable, and I know it's a lot to digest. So again, we will be sure to send a follow-up email with all of the resources that Dr. Cha provided, so you all can kind of really, really dive into them in your own time. I did see in the Q&A, and again, for all of those kind of like super hyper specific questions on a particular student in a particular situation, I encourage you all to, reach out to myself, reach out to Dr. Cha directly via email for additional support. But I know that there are some conversations when it comes to kind of financial aid and like who is the correct parent and whose information we need to report. So there was a question in Q&A about mentoring an undocumented student who lives with a legal guardian who's a cousin. The student has had no contact with her parents for 2 years, and if the CSS profile for the CSS profile, the guardian would need to provide their financial information. Do you have any thoughts on that, Dr. Shaw? I have kind of like my own thoughts and additional resources, but I'm happy to have you share first.
Um, Go ahead. You go first, Diane. You have an
So
answer.
my understanding, and again, the CSS profile versus the FAFSA is always super duper tricky. Once again, the FAFSA is for federal aid, and so if your student is undocumented, they will not be eligible or not an eligible non-citizen. They will not be able to fill out the FAFSA. But in the instance of the FAFSA, they would be considered an independent student. The CSS profile is a little bit trickier. It's kind of a generalized profile that institutions use to determine their own institutional aid that they will be providing students. And so on the CSS profile itself, if the student is considered independent, and the cousin has not formally adopted this student, they might not need to at first submit the guardians, the cousins, financial information on the CSS profile. They will need to report the parents' information, but if you're saying that there's been no contact for 2 years, then they could probably pretty easily petition for a non-custodial parent waiver, to pretty much just state that they don't have contact with the parent. That would be co-signed by you as a counselor, by a therapist, or a clergy member. That said, some institutions might look at the CSS profile and note that there's been no parent information updated, and ask for the financial information of the legal guardian, on their own accord. It wouldn't be directly through CSS profile, but the institution themselves can go ahead and ask for that information. So I think your best bet for that particular student is to also just try to be in touch with the admissions rep for that particular school and ask, how they would see this particular student's situation from a financial aid context. So that's kind of the best tips I have. I will say that You Aspire is a really awesome organization that has really great trainings both on FAFSA and the CSS profile, and they do frequently touch on considerations that undocumented students should have when filling out these forms. So I encourage you to check out their resources as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. My short answer was going to be contact the universities because again, every university is kind of doing a little bit things a little bit differently, and then just be prepared to write a letter stating that yes, you're aware of the issues that they haven't had contact, and then be willing to sign that letter. Or some districts are a little picky about what you put on letterhead, so making sure that your admin's aware that you're going to provide that letter as well.
Yeah, amazing. Um, Again, lots of love for you, Dr. Cha, in the chat. And to reiterate, yes, the recording will be available in the follow-up email, as well as all of the links to the resources that Dr. Cha provided. So you will have access to all of that as well. And then I see a question. Do you have feedback from students that were recipients from QuestBridge? That feels like a pretty general question. I don't know if you have any immediate thoughts on that, Dr. Cha, or if the person who asked that question has kind of more
Yeah.
context on what it is exactly they want to know.
Yeah, a little more context would be helpful.
So glad to hear that folks are feeling better and more equipped to support their students and families. That's the goal for these sessions. So um,
Honestly, that makes me feel better too, because I'm like, oh, am I overwhelming them with resources? I did not want you to feel like that. So I'm glad that it's been helpful.
Wonderful, wonderful. I don't see a follow-up from this question. I encourage you to reach out via email if you do have some more content. I also want to be respectful of folks' time, so I think we'll go ahead and stop the recording here. But again, you will get a follow-up email from us later this week with direct contact information for Dr. Cha if you would like to reach out further, as well as all of the resources that were listed tonight. So once again, to all of you that joined us this evening, thank you so much for the work that you do and for your commitment to continuing to learn more, to continue supporting these and all of your students. So thank you so much, Dr. Cha, and I hope you all have a wonderful night and rest of your week.
Thank you so much, everyone.